to item 6, the petition of Lydia Chai to ban plastic waste exports to developing countries. Tēnā koe, Lydia. Apologies for keeping you waiting, but we've had another interesting petition. Thank you for the supporting information that you presented. The committee has read that, so you don't need to read it out. But if you would like to talk briefly to the petition, you have 10 minutes, and then I'm sure there will be questions from members, so please allow some time for those. Then we will go to officials, and then we will come back to you for a final comment.
Kia ora. Let me just start my timer because I respect your time. E te rangatira tēnā koutou katoa, ngā mihi mai oha kia koutou katoa. Ko Lydia Chai aho. Salamat pagi, and thank you for the opportunity to say my piece in Parliament. This morning I bring with me the voices of 11,500 people who have signed my petition to ban the export of plastic waste to developing countries. And with me on the call today are my fellow Malaysian activists who want the same thing. They are Ms. Pua Leping, Ms. Mageswari Sangaralingam, and Mr. Heng Kia Chun, who works for Greenpeace Malaysia. Members of the Select Committee, I will take my written evidence as read, but what I want to impress upon you today is why a ban is the only solution to the problems that you read in my submission. This boils down to two reasons. The first reason is the sheer volumes that we're sending overseas. The second reason is that I argue the Basel Convention safeguards that the other submitters are relying on, they do not work. And I will then conclude by taking any questions that you have. And feel free to ask questions from my guests as well. But before I go into all that, I just wanted to tell you a brief story. It was 2 years ago that I found out New Zealand still sends plastic waste overseas. I was totally shocked, and even more shocked when I found out that it's sent to my hometown in Malaysia. I read about Ms. Pua's story on the news. She talked about smelling toxic fumes at night because the plastic was being burned illegally to escape authorities. She could smell it in bed at night. She talked about how cancer and asthma rates shot up ever since the waste trade entered Malaysia after the China's national sword policy came in. And she talked about the environment being destroyed, the waterways being severely polluted. And so I was thinking, hey, my family's breathing in the same air. I couldn't sit there and not do anything. Members of the Select Committee, I've been given 10 minutes to argue for a ban, and the other submitters, they have 10 minutes each. So collectively 30 minutes to argue against my petition. And you will hear them say things like, New Zealand's not as bad as other countries. And it's true, yep, we're not as bad, but come on, let me tell you what not as bad looks like. In the last 6 years, New Zealand has sent 200 million kilograms of plastic waste overseas. And this is just the plastic waste, it's not the other waste we're sending. That's an eye-watering amount. And yes, I'm here to tell you that it's the high-grade plastics that we're sending that is also causing harm. And here's why. Now, all of you picture a bale of plastic, and it's a perfect bale of plastic. It's single stream. It's got a good 0.5 rate of contamination in it, 0.5%, which is the industry goal. Now, within that bale of plastic, I want you to think of two things. The first thing is all the plastic that does get processed. And the second thing is the contamination that's in it. With the plastic that does get processed, we now know that plastics processing facilities are not good for the environment. Just last month, there was a groundbreaking study done in Scotland that said it studied a state-of-the-art facility, and it said that it found that up to 16% of the plastics that this facility receives was being leached out into the environment. Now, Malaysia has no such state-of-the-art recycling facility. In my home state of Selangor alone, which is where Jen Jerome is, there are 332 plastic recycling factories. That is just shocking to me. And that's not including the illegal ones. So there's more than that. The industry would have you believe that they audit these factories. Now, I'm calling them out right now. I know they are good people and they want to do the right thing, but you can't say that you audit these factories properly. First of all, New Zealand companies are sending them to brokers in Malaysia a lot of the time, and so that gets on sold to the highest bidder. So there's no control of the plastic bales once it leaves our shores. The second thing is that when they do these audits, I don't know, every few years or so, I don't believe that they're actually checking the filters to see how much leachate is going out of these factories. I don't think they know if the workers are treated ethically. I don't think they could find out even if a resource consent was granted legally without bribery and corruption. Because as we all know, Malaysia is a machine oiled by corruption, man. And how could we ever trust such a system? This is why I'm calling for a ban to developing countries. Now, I want to address the second thing in that bale of plastic I asked you to picture. The second thing was the contamination. A 0.5% contamination rate is touted as a good rate by the industry. They don't always achieve this. At least it wasn't 20% contamination. Now it's 0.5. Sounds like a good number. But let me take you back to that number I told you earlier, which was 200 million kilograms that we have already sent. 0.5% of that is 1 million kilograms that we've already sent overseas, that's already been burned, buried, dumped. It's already been leached. Is it any wonder that Southeast Asia has the highest levels of marine plastic pollution in the world? Now, the second main point that I want to make today is that the Basel Convention does not work. And this is for two reasons. The first reason is that the prior written consent requirement is actually meaningless, because who are we asking consent from? Is it the customs people, the waste operators? It's the industry people. It's not the residents. Residents have not been consulted. They do not consent. And yet they are the ones suffering the most from the ills of the waste industry. People like Ms. Phua, who is on the call. And the second reason that the Basel Convention does not work is that we cannot be sure that the plastic is being processed in an environmentally safe manner. And I've addressed this a few moments ago. I would also add that even Malaysian politicians themselves have told me they do not have the manpower to monitor these facilities or to regulate and enforce the laws. Therefore, members of the Select Committee, to conclude, the only solution is for a full ban on plastic waste exports, not to dump our problems onto more vulnerable countries. That's not the Kiwi way. We've heard it from 11,500 people. We want to take responsibility over our waste. And just think about how proud we would be as New Zealanders if we achieve this. The world will sit up and take notice. They'll pay attention. They will try to emulate what we've done. We will be, we'll have to be inventive. We'll create more jobs domestically and create more incentives to reduce the plastic waste. A ban will do that, will speed the process. That would be the Kiwi way. Thank you. No reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Happy to take your questions.
Tēnā koe, Lydia, very effective presentation.